Well, everything just slipped right back on in 30 seconds, or at least one swig of a beer. Now the bolts. Of course, get all the bolts in kind of finger tight before you even think about tightening them. You'll never get them to line up if you start tightening the bolts before they're all in. You know, I just got an idea and it worked. I cut the end off that little alignment tool, and while prying the transmission over a tiny bit more with my pry bar, there was enough room, dirty as it was, to get my hand in there and actually slip that tool in. And I didn't have to use my more tedious method of rotating the pressure plate and tapping the friction disc in line to get it to line up. Sweet, now I just have to tighten all the bolts evenly. Well, time to jack the motor and tranny back up to a more level position in the car so that hopefully the transmission just slips on easily. The odd time you've got to rotate the engine a little bit while you're slipping it on, or put it in a few different positions, or put the car in gear and twist the rotor, the brake rotor, and rotate things a little bit, just get the splines to line up. Let's see what happens. So getting to slip the transmission back on once you got the new clutch on is always the trickiest part. Sometimes it just jumps right on, but most times it doesn't. So I'll show you a little trick that I used that helps me a lot. I just take a couple of the wrong bolts that hold the top of the transmission to the motor. You see the right bolts are much smaller, and these wrong bolts act as guides. You just get the transmission jacked up to the right height and all parallel and level. Screw these in the two top places. Every transmission has those two top bolts, and then they're just like slip guides for the transmission to slide along these bolts. And when you have the jack under the tranny and a little bit of a pry bar helping you push, it can slip it right on. Another trick I did was I put the transmission in gear. That axle is of course still attached. And then I crawled under the other side and used a hammer and a piece of wood to tap the other inner CV joint back into the transmission. Now that the transmission couldn't turn, while I'm pushing I could rotate the engine a little bit, and that caused the splines to just suddenly line up and the transmission just jumped in well on these bolts. Then when it's all jumped in like that, I can take these bolts out one at a time and put the correct bolts back in. Now the job is done. Everything else is easy. Just got to get the power tools in, whip all the bolts in place, and it's time for another beer. Well, I lost some gear oil, of course, when the transmission axle was pulled out a bit and it was tipped. So I found this black cap on top of the tranny, and that's the tranny vent. I just pulled it hard and it came off. Now I'm going to squeeze some lube back in there. All done now? Ready for a test voyage. Putting it back together was just straightforward, just like taking it apart. I already adjusted the clutch so there was an inch of play. And let's see what's going to happen. Well, she runs anyways. Man, that's wore out. Feels good so far. Yeah, baby. It's not mine. Feels real good. I like it. Sweet home. Well, this job ought to keep me enough beer money to last me a week. That's all that matters. Another day, another beer. Oh, by the way, the new clutch was $137 plus tax for that whole kit.